So I've been seeing this trend going around on Twitter and Facebook recently about 5 influential video games from your childhood. And I was kind of like, I think I'm gonna steal that as a video idea because I think that's really cute and cool and stuff. For those who have been on the channel for long enough, you know I am a very nostalgic person when it comes to video games. I think one of the coolest things about games and gaming is just how just one little cartridge or one little disc can hold so many memories, not just of your time playing the game itself, but what was going on in your life while you're playing the game, how it helped you as a person throughout various things. Like it's a really incredible form of media. And I love talking about the nostalgia behind games, so I thought this was gonna be a kind of a cool video idea to do. And I highly encourage you in the comments, let me know 5 influential games from your childhood. They don't have to be your most favoritist games of all time, and don't tailor the list to make you seem like cool, mega macho gamer person. Be totally honest, like, you know, if Pets Horses 2 was one of your most influential games, put it on that list. Put it on that list. I want to see. I want to know what made you into the gamer you are today. So I figured a great way to kick off this list is by talking about the very first video game that I have any memories playing. And that would be The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. I don't physically have the version I played back then. It was the Master Quest version that came out for the GameCube. At least I think. It was either that or the N64 version, but I'm pretty sure it was the GameCube version. Pretty sure. Can't totally remember. And I mean, I was really young, so when I say I played this game back then, it was more of a wonderful situation where my older cousins took pity upon me for wanting to play a video game so badly with them that they let me run around Lon Lon Ranch on Epona. And only Lon Lon Ranch, they didn't let me go anywhere, but it was still enough of a taste of the video gaming world to be like, I want to learn more about this. I want to do more about this. I just played Zelda. I don't even know what Zelda is, but I want to learn more about Zelda. And I really look at that memory specifically as like the inciting moment. And I have my older cousins to thank for that, because they could have easily said like, no, you dumb baby, you're not playing video games. And I really do think that would have discouraged me from really trying video games out as young as I did. Maybe I would have picked them up eventually, but I really do think that them, you know, setting it aside for a second. We'll go to the temple in a little bit. Let's let Alex run around for a little bit and see what happens. I think if they hadn't done that, I really don't know if I would have gotten into video games like I did. Because that was just such a core and special memory of I'm playing a video game with my older cousins who I love. It was really special. So and I've mentioned it before on the channel too, like many of my early video gaming memories spawn from memories with my older cousins. I'm an only child. I have no siblings, so they were the closest thing I had, and I think it just made the whole experience more special for me. So yeah, definitely Ocarina of Time belongs on the list of most influential games for sure. While I didn't pick up a Zelda game for many years later after that point, I think the first Zelda game I played after that might have been Phantom Hourglass because I didn't have any other Zeldas until after Phantom Hourglass, where I was like, this is not the Zelda I remember, and then started playing a lot more after that. I think that's the route I went, was from Ocarina of Time to Phantom Hourglass, which is really funny. But yeah, so even though I didn't play Zelda for a while afterwards, I picked up other games that I either especially remember my older cousins playing or thought that they played. We'll get to that a little later on down the list. And that's definitely where the inciting beginning began, I guess is how we're gonna say it. Next is a game from a similar era of my life. So at my grandparents, same side of the family that my older cousins are on, we had an NES. It was my dad's NES, and he just kind of left it at their house at some point in time, just as a thing to play with, and another precious family memory of playing the NES during the holidays and stuff. But one game that really stood out to me more than any of the others, and I've touched a bit about this game and series a little bit on the channel in different videos, but one game that really stood out to me on the NES, and is a game that I still play in its various formats today, is Tetris. I adore Tetris. I am a big Tetris fan. I have Tetris lights. I have Tetris magnets, I have a lot of Tetris things, and a lot of Tetris games as well. I think a lot of people have more core memories with the Game Boy version, but I didn't have an original Game Boy growing up. I had an SP, but I didn't have the Tetris, but I did have Tetris on the NES. And this was a game that I've talked about before. It was kind of a family tradition, even when my older cousins weren't there, but for Thanksgiving, my grandma and I would play Tetris a lot. She played Tetris with me on various consoles throughout the years, but the NES one was really, really special. And this is the game that kind of made me think, especially when I was getting into high school, like late middle school, high school, where I was like, I kind of want to start picking up some older games that I might have missed at some point in time, because we didn't have an extensive NES collection. I only have a few NES games from that overall collection that we have. The rest are still at my grandpa's, and most of them are sports games, which I would like to, bring back, collaborate with the rest of the collection at some point in time, since the NES is here, but I just haven't yet. But it did kind of make me think, I want to pick up games for older consoles that I might have missed. I don't know why Tetris was the inciting game for that, but really, and overall, my love of Tetris is infinite. I love Tetris. I think it's just such a fun game, and it's one that it was always a game that I always strove to be better at. Growing up, I struggled with the idea of I need to be good at something right away, otherwise I suck and I can never get good at it. And I think that's something that a lot of people my age, and even in the younger generation, really struggle with. In different ways, obviously, in different ways, but I do think that is something that is very prevalent for a lot of people. But Tetris was one of those things, as silly as it might sound, where I was like, no, I want to get better at this. I want to be really, really good at Tetris. And I'd say I'm pretty good at Tetris. I'm still not to where I wish I would be, because I took a very long break of not playing at all. But it was one of those games where I just felt inspired to get good at, which, I don't know, I think that's a pretty special thing. So not only did it ignite my passion for wanting to collect games, especially older games, but it also just made me want to get good. And of course, there's a lot of really good memories associated with Tetris, with my grandma and all of that stuff. Those are really precious memories that I will never, ever let go of, because even though my grandparents on either side of my family were never really gamers, so to say, they did it because they loved me and wanted to do something with me, and Tetris was a really easy one for my grandma to get into because she actually enjoyed it too. So it was just a really special thing. So this is definitely another really influential one for sure, specifically the NES version. All right, to the surprise of no one, there is a Harvest Moon game on this list. I'm a big Harvest Moon Story of Seasons fan. What can I say? What can I say? And I don't think it's really gonna surprise anyone what one is probably the most influential of all of them, but it's Harvest Moon More Friends of Mineral Town. I don't even know if you can see it. It's so tiny. But I do also have the manual, which I found recently. It was in a drawer, so I'm really glad I found it. But this Harvest Moon game was my first ever one. It was the one that I picked up because I had sworn in my life, I had told my mom, I was like, no, I know my older cousins have played Harvest Moon. It's true. I know it in my soul. I need to have this game so I can relate to them. And that was not true. They never played Harvest Moon. I think if they played Harvest Moon, they might have had some of the GameCube, but I don't even remember if they did or not. But they definitely did not have this game. So yeah, this one was my very first Harvest Moon game, and definitely has a utterly special place in my heart as one of my favorites. But not only that, but it inspired a lot of other gaming related things, kind of like how Tetris inspired me wanting to collect later on down in life. Harvest Moon inspired a lot of other interesting things, mainly branching out from what my older cousins were playing and doing my own research into other games out there, and just research into games in general before I bought them. I don't always do that. One of the magical things I think about childhood was picking out a game, being like, this looks cool, dumping it in your bag, and then maybe it was or maybe it wasn't. And I think that's still a super precious childhood memory as well. But because I was looking up so many romance guides after I realized just how poorly I was doing in this game and my romantic quests, it kind of opened my eyes a little bit into looking up other games, looking up games that were coming out. What was the next Harvest Moon game coming out? And stuff like that, which I think is also a very interesting thing of the early 2000s, is remembering early forums or early Harvest Moon related forums, and just thinking like, oh, who are you marrying? What gifts are you giving to this person? And like, just, it was a really interesting time being like, you know, 9, 10, just on the internet looking for all of this romance advice in Harvest Moon. It's so silly. It's so silly. But it's true. Once I kind of picked up Harvest Moon, I was like, okay, what other game series are out there that I haven't heard of before? And that it definitely really inspired me to look up similar games or totally different games and just see what I would like. So especially when I got into the DS era, I felt myself branching out quite a bit more than what I would normally play. Still not to where I'm at like today, where I'm like, I'll give whatever a try, why not? But definitely I felt my tastes expanding once I got to Harvest Moon. And again, in a kind of similar vein, another game that I had never seen my older cousins play, but my mom played, and a big instigator as to why I love RPGs so much, Final Fantasy, the original Final Fantasy, but on the PSP. So this is the 20th anniversary edition of Final Fantasy 1, and yeah, in all of its UMD glory. So my mom played Final Fantasy on the Game Boy, like growing up, because her and my aunt had a Game Boy, shared it. She loved anything fantasy, and Final Fantasy was one of those things. So when she picked up a PSP, she had done research, she was like, yeah, that looks super duper cool. She got that, and then eventually picked up this. And so I had been watching over her shoulder play it for a while and being like, man, this looks kind of cool. I'm kind of interested in this. So eventually she was like, all right, give it a try. And I was obsessed. I loved Final Fantasy from that moment forward. So I'm not super up to date with the like newest Final Fantasies, as a lot of people know. After we kind of started straying away from the really fantastical element of it, I started finding other RPGs. Eventually I do want to play some of the more recent ones. That's on the list of things to do. But regardless, this just took me in so quickly with, again, the fantasy aspects of it, the monster designs, just having my own party and like trying to come up with strategies of, okay, how do I take down this monster? All of that. Like, it was something that, even though I had played Pokemon before, I hadn't looked at it in the same way. Like, Pokemon was Pokemon to me, and it still kind of is. I don't really categorize Pokemon in the same level of RPGs that most of my other RPGs that I play in, because they're just two separate entities in my brain. Some people might disagree with that, and that's totally fine. That's just how I see it, and that's how I saw it back then. Like, this was a very new experience to me back then, is having a party to work with and to take down creatures. I just loved it so much. And while Final Fantasy is not my favorite Final Fantasy by any stretch of the imagination, it just took my imagination by like a chokehold. Like, every time that I wasn't playing Final Fantasy, I was thinking about my party and like maybe any party banter they would have between one another. I wrote stories about my party in Final Fantasy. Like, it took so much of my life, and just I was like, man, what if these characters had more personalities? And then that took me to Final Fantasy IV. But without this initial push into Final Fantasy, I wouldn't have had any desire to pick up Final Fantasy IV on the DS, which again, where my real love of RPGs ignited, because I love Final Fantasy IV so much. But this was like the moment, you know? This was where it all began. So I will always be very grateful to Final Fantasy I for doing that, because without just that introduction to working as a party to take down monsters and, like, again, the initial fantasy elements, the initial mystery behind the story, I wouldn't have gotten into it. So big props to Final Fantasy I. And finally, this is a silly one, but it is so true and really was an extremely influential game in my childhood. Older childhood, but still. Pokemon Ranger Shadows of Almia. I love this game so unironically. Like, this is a wonderful, wonderful game. It's a silly Pokemon spin-off, and that's all there is to it. But this game, kind of like how Final Fantasy made me start writing stories about characters, this game, like, again, took my imagination just by the throat. I started writing stories about this game. So having played Pokemon before, like, having a Pokemon spin-off that was so, like, easy to play but fun, with fun dialogue, fun characters, all of that, it was really, like, just this crazy experience of, oh my gosh, the Pokemon world is expanding right before my very eyes and I want to be a part of it. So again, it influenced writing lots of fan fiction that is still online if you can find it, haha. But lots of fan fiction, and again, it inspired me looking up other games of series, spin-offs of games, and just, it was just such a special time. I played the heck out of this game. I still will play the heck out of this game. I've replayed Shadows of Almia specifically more times than I can count, probably more times than any other game, because I just love this game so much. I love the goofy characters. I love every part of it. And it was one of those games where my family, when I asked for it for Christmas, they were like, you want another one of these? Because I had gotten the first one for my birthday when I got my DS. And they were like, so you draw circles? Yes, you do. You do draw circles. But it was something about that first game that just really brought me in. And then when I picked up Shadows of Almia, which I do believe is the best of the 3 Pokemon Ranger games, in my opinion, I think the story and the characters just drew me in even more so. And yeah, it was an interesting one to include on this list because this didn't really have any, like, outside, like, reactions other than the fan fictions, but I feel like this really was an influential game. It really, really was. It was probably one of the first games I ever replayed so terribly much. It's also one of the first games, not that I remember finishing, but I remember feeling this sense of, like, what do I do now after I finished it? So I mean, I guess there's that too, but yeah, Shadows of Almia was just, it's a great experience. If you haven't played Pokemon Ranger, try to pick up these games because they're glorious. I love them a lot. So those are 5 of my most influential games. There are definitely, like, way more. I could have talked about so many other games, but I wanted to keep it to 5, you know, to stick with the trend and stuff. But I hope that you found it interesting and enjoyable. I thought it was kind of a cool way, especially if you're new to the channel and, like, just starting to get to know the mess that is Quality Individual. It's kind of a good introduction to me. It gives you a little bit of the insight as to why I love the games that I love today as much as I do, because of these very important games growing up. So I thought it was kind of a cool idea. And again, please tell me 5 of your influential games from your childhood. I'd love to hear them. If you also want to hear more about games from my youth, but, like, on the weirder side of things, I do have a video talking about weird games I was obsessed with from my childhood. I personally think it's one of my most underrated YouTube videos of all time. IMO. I really loved making that video, so feel free to go check that one out as well. But if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. I'd super duper appreciate it. If you're not already subscribed and you like the nostalgia, the video gaming vibes here, maybe consider subscribing. I like to think I'm okay. But that is going to do it for this video, everyone. Thank you so much for sticking around for this very nostalgic, kind of chiller video. It was really fun to make. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye! Boop!